just decided to enter on a whim, basically, and I ended up winning.
This is Marquis Henderson, a 16-year-old boy who has just performed the greatest upset in trading card game history, because he just won a 1,400-man Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship out of nowhere. Even more surprising was the fact that this was the first large Yu-Gi-Oh! Event he had ever attended. A random kid who had never even won a local tournament would somehow embrace the heart of the cards to breeze through the top tables, humiliating pro players along the way, some of whom were so salty that they refused to shake the boy's hand after the match was over. You see, while his opponents used decks that cost thousands of dollars, Marquis instead scrounged together a deck using only cards that he could afford. But he would still somehow assemble a strategy that would completely counter the best decks in the metagame. Yet in the eyes of the elitist Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, not only was he a nobody, but he was piloting a mediocre, frustrating deck that they thought was terrible. So just how did he manage to conquer all odds and win a Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship? Well, allow me to explain. Our story starts in the year 2012, where Marquis is a freshman in high school, playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Casually with his friends during lunch. Though highly popular, Yu-Gi-Oh! is one of the most expensive trading card games. Rare cards were frequently short printed, creating artificial scarcity, with the staple cards needed for each deck costing hundreds of dollars on the secondary market. Needless to say, it was difficult for anyone to acquire these powerful cards, never mind a boy in high school who had bigger priorities to save for, like hot lunch and Jordans. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! was also one of the most complex games, often with rules that weren't written anywhere in the official rulebook. Because of these reasons, despite the game being marketed towards children, the average tournament would still comprise mainly of adults in their 20s and 30s. So being only 16 years old certainly made things a lot harder. Now, Marquis would learn from his friends that there was a local card store in their area that hosted Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments every Saturday, with a flood of eager duelists occupying every square foot of the store. Though he consistently attended these tournaments for months, he would never win a single one.
I wasn't even really playing, but for like a year and a half, I just kind of started. But yeah, I'd never won locals before. I've been playing just with my friends and stuff like that.
Being a big city, the players in his local scene in Atlanta were much more skilled and had the budget to play the most powerful decks. Yet with each and every tournament, Marquis would slowly improve. After school, he would go online to research the metagame on forums and watch videos to learn the combos. Outside of drumline and basketball, Yu-Gi-Oh! Had quickly become his favorite hobby. While his skills were no doubt improving, being a high school student, he still didn't have access to the game's strongest cards. Popular decks at the time included the Dino Rabbit strategy, which leveraged the cuddly Rescue Rabbit to summon out two normal dinosaurs that could be combined into the Evolzerlagia and Doka to negate card and monster effects. It would go toe-to-toe with the Wind-Ups, a combo deck that could set up an army of toys and rip away the opponent's hand on the first turn with a loop that involved recycling the Wind-Up Hunter over and over again. But they made these decks really hard to put together. Their signature cards were printed in the highest rarity, Secret Rare, which meant you would be lucky to even pull one out of a box of 36 booster packs. To give you an example, Rescue Rabbit and Evolzer Doka were both $80 each, and cards like Wind Up Zenmains were $150. And most of the time you could play up to 3 copies of a given card, so if you multiply that, it was pretty ridiculous even by modern day standards. But it gets worse, because there were 2 cards that were so powerful, every single deck would have to play them. Tour Guide from the Underworld was a generic monster that summoned Sangan from the deck, who could then search for all of the other deck's signature monsters when he was sent to the graveyard. But it also spawned 2 bodies for an instant XC summon, like Levier the Sea Dragon to revive Rescue Rabbit or Wind Up Zenmighty to summon out any Wind-Up. And 3 copies of Tour Guide cost $450 because of its secret rarity and, of course, the waifu tax. Then there was Maxi, a shiny bug that let the user draw a card for every summon the opponent conducted on a given turn. A mandatory counter to heavy combo decks like the Wind-Ups, and one of the only ways to circumvent the turn 1 hand loop when going second.
And here comes the infamous loop, folks.
It's ironically still one of the most powerful cards in modern day, which justifies its $100 price tag at the time. In total, this meant that you would have to spend well over $1,000 to build a solid Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. Without these staple cards, you were basically put at a significant disadvantage, a barrier that many players would struggle with at the time, and honestly that kind of continues to this day. Marquis would obviously feel a little discouraged, knowing that this was an issue that he and his friends had faced. But one day in their group chat, one of Marquis' friends excitedly shared an idea. a deck that had somehow won the national championship the year prior out of nowhere. It was a TG stun deck.
My friend showed me, he's like, oh, like this deck is cheap, you can play this deck. I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot.
A strategy that leveraged using trap cards to stun the opponent out from playing, like Skill Drain, which, as the name would imply, negated all monster effects on the field.
Skill Drain stops everything. And in my head, I was like, I didn't know too much. I was like reading all the cards. I'm like, is this not the best card in the game?
Now, the whole concept of the TG deck was to stun out the opponent using the trap cards, while the Tech Genis monsters would replace themselves when they were destroyed in combat, creating a cycle of near infinite resources while whittling down the opponents using the traps. And since these effects activated in the graveyard, they were unaffected by Skill Drain, which only negated monster effects on the field.
This deck is like great. Like this is the one I just win the most with. I just played so much with it. Played it for like 5 or 6 months, just that one deck.
Marquis quickly jumped onto the idea. The cards were relatively cheap for the most part and easily accessible. The only problem with this deck was that its competitiveness was rather short-lived. By this time, it had since been outclassed by newer cards and excessive power creep that was difficult for trap-based decks to keep up with, especially when going second. So the deck had been dropped by the rest of the player base. But Marquis would continue playing TGs. It became his signature deck, and he strove to make it even better, making tweaks to it day by day. This would continue for the next few months, and as time passed, Marquis would eventually participate in regional tournaments. These were events on a larger scale that would attract stronger opponents, often a few hundred, who would travel from other cities in hopes of placing in the top percentile to receive an invite to the national championship held at the end of the year. His best finish at these regionals would be a 7-3 final record, a career highlight. An impressive feat on paper, but not exactly notable in the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh scene, for you would typically need a 9-1 record to place in the top 8 and receive prizing. So naturally, no one in the competitive scene would know the name Marquis Henderson, never mind even in his own local area. But just a few months later, this would change completely. It was soon announced that Atlanta would be the host city for the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series, the most competitive tournament at the highest peak of the game that would draw over 1,000 duelists, including notable pro players who dominated the tournament circuit. Now, Marquis was rather unfamiliar with championship-level tournaments. His familiarity with competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Was limited mostly to his area, with regional tournaments being the extent of what he had experienced. So when his friends told him about YCS Atlanta, he figured it'd be the size of regionals, with 100 players or two at most. But he had no idea that this would be something far greater than he would have ever imagined.
My friend just told me about this event. Like I didn't know what it was going to be. I thought it was like 50, 100 people. My dad, the first day I went to the event, YCS, he's like chilling in the freaking convention center. He's like, oh yeah, we can go to the convention center. I'll go with you.
On the Friday of the tournament, his dad would drive him to the venue to pick up their entry badges. And only upon entering would he be shocked by the sheer scale of the event. Instead of a few hundred players, there was well over 1,000.
There was like a million people running around. I'm like, I don't even want to enter. He's like, you have to enter. We're already here. I'm like, okay, I'll enter.
A robust hall filled with the most competitive, daring challengers, many of whom had ventured from the opposite side of the country to test their skills. You see, the winners of this tournament in particular would receive the coveted Blood Mephist prize card, that to this day sells for thousands of dollars. Unlike the other prize cards, and for reasons unknown, the Blood Mephist has never been reprinted. Rumors say it's due to legal reasons with the card's original artist, meaning that the only copies of the card in existence to this very day were the limited copies given out to the winners of these tournaments, making it now one of the rarest cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. So naturally, there was a big prize at stake. But before the tournament had even begun, these players had already activated their strongest card, the credit card. The vendors were completely overwhelmed, with players swiping left and right, forced to pay premiums on last-minute cards that they needed for competition the very next day. Most of them were using Dino Rabbit or Windups, with a few other decks in between that were equally as pricey. Luckily for Marquis, the expensive cards in his TG deck, like Pot of Duality and Solemn Warning, had already been reprinted the year prior, costing only a few dollars instead of hundreds. But nevertheless, he still wanted to make important additions to his deck where possible. With only $40 left to his name, Maxi was out of the equation, certainly putting him at a disadvantage, especially when going second, and he would perhaps be the only player in the entire hall that was not playing the card. But at the same time, he had a feeling inside that for his trap-heavy deck, he wouldn't need it. And you know, saving $300 $100 didn't seem like a bad idea either. Instead, Marquis walked up to the vendors and decided to finally splurge on a lone copy of Brionac Dragon of the Ice Barrier, a card that wasn't necessary for the deck at all, but could be made in niche scenarios with a TG Striker, and was another step to optimizing his deck into the strongest it could possibly be for the tournament the next day.
Spent my last $40 on the Brionac that I needed for my deck. I summoned it once, but it won me the game, so it was freaking worth it.
Lastly, in place of the Marquis, he opted instead to run 2 copies of the Beast King Barbaros, a card that had never seen play before. Though printed as a level 8 with an attack value of 3000, Beast King had an effect that would allow its user to drop its attack to 1900 and normal summon it without tributing any monsters. But while Skill Drain was on the field, it would negate this drawback completely and restore its attack back to 3000, threatening even the Blue Eyes White Dragon. His deck would maximize the full capacity of Skill Drain, a card whose potential he recognized early on. Thunder King Ryle would stun the opponent from searching their deck for cards, while Horn of the Phantom Beast boosted his beast monsters and let him draw a card each time the monster trampled over an opposing one by battle. And last but not least, Reborn Tengu was a pesky beast warrior who could be powered up by the Horn and also replace itself when it was removed from the field. In total, his deck would cost just over $100, and most of the players in the hall would scoff at the idea of this deck being remotely competitive, until day 1 of the tournament kicked off, which would start off extremely well for Marquis Henderson, who jump-started his event with 6 wins and 0 losses, with his friends shocked beyond belief. Marquis was completely locked in.
I ended up going 6-0, and that's when I was like, what the heck, so...
He would only drop his first match in round 7 to an Empty Jar deck, another rogue strategy that relied on decking out the opponent by looping the Morphing Jar over and over again.
And then I lost round 7 to very insane opponent. I'm sitting here reading, is this work? It's yeah, this works. So this freaking Empty Jar guy, I even flipped Skill Drain on him, and he's literally still killing me through Skill Drain, flip up and then I'll chain Book of Moon. Okay, now it's face down, I'll dump your hand again. I was like, what? What are you talking about?
But outside of this, all of his other opponents had utilized powerful meta decks, and some of these opponents became perturbed, for Marquis would have to read a lot of their cards, which agitated them even further because this dude was going around playing a frustrating rogue deck, but also reading the popular cards that they would have expected him to know with a 6-0 record at a major tournament like this. And both his opponents and the judges were especially shocked to find that Marquis wasn't familiar with the combos and rulings that they thought were basic.
When I say I wasn't really that into the game, I hadn't played for that long, the judge had to explain me for a minute or two about the rulings of Wind Up Shark and Wind Up Magician. So I'm how does that work? And I'm I don't know, whatever. I had to read a lot of the cards. Yeah, it was just a lot. I didn't know dueling was that much.
It also pissed him off even further that he was flipping cards like Skill Drain that nullified their expensive cards.
Some people didn't like the deck because obviously you just stun your opponent, stuff like that. Yeah, it is what it is. Obviously I drew the right traps very often, drew Skill Drain a lot.
These players were completely shocked, and word of mouth spread pretty quickly. Online chatter slowly begun with rumors of an unknown duelist who was playing in his first ever YCS with a budget version of an outdated deck idea that pissed off the pro players at the top tables. While many reveled in the chaos and cheered Marquis on, others were less than optimistic. Some of the pro players at the event even refused to shake his hand after the match, as they were extremely salty about the prospect of losing to such a player, and a deck that locked them down from playing, never mind one that was full of cheap, low rarity cards.
I don't know if he appreciated I just kept drawing Skill Drain. I kept drawing freaking Skill Drain, and he actually MST'd when I flipped another one in response. So I just have freaking 2 Skill Drains. He killed when I just have another one. So he was mad about that.
Marquis would play against several opponents utilizing the Dino Rabbit deck, a matchup that he found to be favorable midway throughout the tournament. He would set as many trap cards as possible, and then use Skill Drain to lock out their signature Evolzar monsters.
What I was most afraid of was the Dino Rabbit deck, because they can just a free negate. I'm oh, well, you can't even get around that. There's nothing you can do. I didn't even know what Dino Rabbit did at the time. I was scared of it. Some of the matches were just brain dead easy. It wasn't even me. It was just a good meta choice.
And at this point, you're probably wondering how he did so well. I mean, it's his first major tournament. He's picking up cards to read them. His opponents are frustrated. What was the secret sauce that Marquis had implemented? Well, for starters, none of his opponents were really prepared, and many of their decks would lack adequate trap removal or ways to counter Skill Drain. You see, a lot of these players weren't even playing Mystical Space Typhoon, which was a classic way to destroy a spell and trap card. In its place, they instead elected to play high-impact hand disruption cards that could be used on the first turn to try and stop the opponent from comboing, like Effect Veiler to negate the wind-up combo, combo. And ironically, these cards happen to be absolutely useless against Marquis' TG stun deck, which neither summoned a lot of monsters nor utilized their effects.
Because no one really cares about like the trap decks back then. Like, at least in that specific event, a lot of people just didn't even play MST. And I don't think some of them cited it. It was kind of smooth sailing if you just get that up and it was like, you can stun your opponent, because a lot of people didn't see it coming.
Since no one was prepared for it, this meant that skill drain was there to stay on Marquis' field, allowing him to ultimately finish with an impressive 9-2 final record.
I called my dad, I was like, oh yeah, you're just going to play in the tournament, have fun, whatever. And I called him after like round, and I was like, oh, I think I have to come back. I think I have to come back to this. And he's like, why? I'm like, well, there's like a day 2. And I guess like I made the day 2. He's like, okay, we'll come back.
Also, if you guys are enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and touch that like button. After the 11 Swiss rounds, the final standings were announced before the top 32 players would face off in a sudden death playoff bracket to ultimately decide the winner of the tournament. And in 12th place was none other than Marquis Henderson. His friends erupted in cheers. Marquis had done the impossible. He had made the top cut of a tournament with almost 1,400 players and defeated multiple pro players along the way with his own unique strategy. But his job wasn't done yet. He still had more Yu-Gi-Oh! To play. His top 32 and top 16 matches would be against Alistair Albanes and Michael Lux, 2 pro players with dozens of prior accolades, the former with a 2nd place championship finish and the latter a 1st place champion. Both players were using Dino Rabbit, which skill drain and a plethora of traps would take care of.
I was in the top cut, and you know they like rope off the freaking place for you for like the duelist to play. And I'm like looking at the concession, so when I won, like, oh, can I go over there? And he's like, no, you can't go any. You got to freaking stay here and do. I'm like, oh, this is freaking serious. Like, what the heck? I can't believe they're like keeping tabs on you. I was like, okay.
On an empty stomach, top 8 would be an uphill battle, for his opponent, John Oxendine, would utilize a wind-up strategy that could spell doom for Marquis if he went 2nd. Like I mentioned earlier, the deck had a signature turn 1 combo that could discard nearly every single card in Marquis' hand before he even had a turn to play, especially because his deck lacked the one defensive card that could refill his hand to prevent this, Max C. But luckily for Marquis, he would win the die roll and go first, setting up skill drain, which was more than enough to stop the windups from, well, winding up.
I did like go 2nd against a lot of wind, and they just didn't have hand. Again, I just lucky. I don't know what the statistics of that are.
Narrowly avoiding disaster thanks to a little bit of luck with the dice roll, the semi-final match would once again test his fortune. It was another wind-up opponent, a pro player by the name of Anthony Pasquarello. Now, Anthony's deck actually played 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, and though Marquis would open the dice roll once again with a set skill drain, Anthony would open with both copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, but the rest of his hand didn't contain any monsters, allowing Marquis to simply beat him down. Even more interesting was the fact that Anthony had anticipated the existence of rogue trap decks, and to account for this even further, he would also side deck copies of Royal Decree, a continuous trap card that negated the effects of all other trap cards. And in the second game, he would open with a copy of Royal Decree and Mystical Space Typhoon, the perfect cards to counter Marquis' strategy. But just like in the first game, the rest of his hand was rather weak, with a lone wind-up rabbit as his only line of offense, which wasn't the card he needed to initiate the wind-up hand loop combo. And not only this, but Marquis would top deck his own copy of Mystical Space Typhoon to destroy the Royal Decree, allowing him to set up his army of trap cards and ultimately win the match. Marquis' Guardian Angel was evidently working overtime. Ironically, Hanse Aguero, the winner of Nationals a year prior and the pioneer of the TG stun deck, yes, the very man who Marquis got his idea from in the first place, would also make the top cut with Dino Rabbit. But he would be knocked out early by another player, so the two wouldn't cross paths. But he would give Marquis a few motivational words for what would be the most important match in his entire life, the finals. His opponent would be the last remaining Dino Rabbit player in the tournament, and the stakes were higher than ever.
The guy in the finals, his name was Roman Rodriguez. I still freaking remember him. Great opponent. It was a great duel. He actually said in the middle, he's like, don't take my picture. And the staff was like, well, we need a picture. He's like, no, I don't do picture. So like, you won't find a picture of him anywhere. So had he come in first, you actually wouldn't have a picture of the winner at all.
Miraculously, Marquis would go first yet again and set up the deck's most optimal opening play, a Beast King Barbaros backed behind 4 powerful trap cards, with, you guessed it, one of them being skill drain. But the icing on top was a Starlight Road that would protect his field from being wiped away by Roman's Heavy Storm. In the second game, with his back against the wall staring down his worst nightmare in the form of 2 Ovosarlagias, he would somehow top deck a Pot of Duality, revealing the top 3 cards of his deck to add one to his hand.
I used 2 traps, beat 2 negates, but I'm still like dying. Did duality and I got dark hole. I freaking cleared it. So like it was like the double Agia, like the thing I was most afraid of. I ended up like somehow getting out of that. It was so lucky.
With the last revealed card miraculously being the dark hole that he needed to wipe away his opponent's entire board. This was a game-winning move that would raise a trophy and the Blood Mephist into the air by the newly crowned champion of YCS Atlanta, Marquis Henderson.
I'm Marquis Henderson.
Speak a little louder, bro.
I'm Marquis Henderson. I just decided to enter on a whim, basically. I decided to enter with TG Stun, and I ended up winning.
Like I didn't even like realize after I won. I was so locked in at the end of the day. I was like, at the end of like the finals, I was like, I don't know. Like I didn't know what to do. I was like, we're still no more dueling. Like I actually was just in the thick of it. And I called my dad. I was like, I ended up winning.
With word of his victory, the entire Yugi net erupted. While the reaction was generally positive, many people couldn't fathom that a nobody had won such a prestigious tournament, especially a first-timer, and of course with a strategy that no one felt was playable. Now, funny enough, there would be another TG Stun deck in the top 32 alongside Marquis, propelling the deck to finally be respected once more. But the pros were angry. They felt that Marquis' deck building was suboptimal. He had played a budget-friendly alternative to the optimal build, foregoing important metagame cards like Maxi that, in their opinion, was a non-negotiable. It was the only way of winning against windups when going second. Beyond that, they also said his ratios were incorrect, like playing one lone copy of Solemn Warning, one of the most powerful trap cards in the game that could negate any summon. Then they molded at the fact that Marquis had side decked 3 copies of Des Wombat, a card that was played for the sole purpose of countering burn decks.
Alright, nobody probably knows what this card is.
What the hell is this, man? Read this, please. Go ahead, continue.
No effect damage.
I really hate burn. I never sided him because I never played chamber, which I'm so happy about.
But you ain't
Play too much windup.
Except that burn decks were rogue in particular, and it was highly unlikely that anyone had entered a championship tournament with one, meaning Marquis had effectively wasted 3 critical slots in his 15-card side deck to account for a non-competitive deck that he'd encountered once or twice at locals. But it gets even worse. One popular rumor would spread online saying that Marquis was autistic, which wasn't true at all, but okay.
It's actually funny. During the tournament, they did start a rumor that I was autistic, and like, oh, this autistic kid won the event. It's like great, blah blah. And it was freaking. I thought it was funny. But no, I'm not autistic anyway. But they started that rumor.
Their only way of rationalizing that Marquis had won was a possibility of him being a savant, someone who had become a Yu-Gi-Oh genius overnight. Some would accuse him of cheating, saying that the only plausible explanation was sleight of hand or rigging of the game and not talent. After all, he had completely shaken up the expectations of what should have won. In their eyes, only a pro player should have been able to win, and using a deck that cost thousands of dollars. A lot of players online would complain about Marquis getting extremely lucky, almost uncharacteristically. One commenter would say, just gonna throw this out there, but the 2 feature matches they put up, his opponents had pretty bad hands, and he had outs to everything. Dude has Yugi level luck. He would frequently win the dice roll and go first, which was the crucial way of winning with a trap deck that could set up an army of defensive options before the opponent got a chance to play. They explored every possible angle to discredit Marquis' victory, but at the same time, others would defend him. Excited that a rogue strategy had won the event, piloted by a new player who had put the rich and the mighty in their place, showing everyone that Yu-Gi-Oh wasn't just about activating the credit card.
I think way more people were just like, hey, listen, like this is a cool deck. You know, I didn't expect to win. This is a nice thing that happened. So honestly, it was way more positive than negative. People came up afterwards like, oh, I really want to play this deck. I think this deck is cool.
Ironically, after his victory, many players even adapted and would begin playing the TG Stun deck. If a 16-year-old kid who had never entered a championship could win with an incomplete build, then the deck had certainly outperformed in some capacity. This was short-lived, however, as the deck was almost immediately hit on the ban list, with both TG Striker and Reborn Tengu, 2 of the deck's main monsters, being restricted. Though not necessarily due to the TG Stun deck, for both of these cards were also abused in other decks around the same time, catching it in the crossfire.
But yeah, that was literally my first big event. The stars aligned, that's all I'll say. The stars aligned. I tried to play well, but it was a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh going on. A lot of Yu-Gi-Oh moments. But that was the only YCS I ever entered, and I ended up winning.
At the end of the day, it seems that all the stars would align for Marquis to win the championship on that fateful weekend. A A combination of fortune, his opponents being unprepared, and the power of skill drain were all factors that played into this. But regardless, his skill was what mattered the most. No matter how lucky you get, you still have to be extremely good at the game to win a championship of 1,400 players. But all of this would come together perfectly to allow him to achieve the greatest monumental feat in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Nevertheless, this would seemingly be the most fortuitous weekend for Marquis Henderson, as he would never again perform at a major Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament.
To this day, actually, that was the only YCS I ever entered. But that was the only YCS I ever entered, and I ended up winning.
Instead retiring from play and starting his own trading card vending booth in Atlanta at the popular card show Charlie's Collectible Show.
I ended up just vending mostly just Yu-Gi-Oh! But it just became more and more. Well, I have a booth in Charlie's Collectible Show, both in the Atlanta and the Houston locations. I can't say enough about Charlie's Collectible Show. Like, they're insane. Like, the owner's done a lot for me. Maybe 60 or 70 like card vendors, anime, sports, like video games.
With a booth called Trading Cards LLC, so if you're in the Atlanta or Houston area, definitely go check out the show. Who knows, you might even see the legend in person. And what happened to the prized Blood Mephist, you might ask?
So because I was 16, I was kind of broke. When I realized that card was actually worth money, I sold it on eBay. Somebody told me it was $1,000. I'm like, I'll just list it for $600. Someone had bought it like that day, and I was like, somebody got a good deal. There you go. Hopefully somebody still has and they're taking care of it. But I still have the trophy, of course.
Regardless, his accomplishment would forever be ingrained as one of the greatest miracles in Yu-Gi-Oh! History, with the community recognizing that Marquis had overcome every possible adversity to embrace the heart of the cards and achieve the impossible.